Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammāṃ Saṅghāṃ Namasami. It's the 16th of February. It's the full moon, Magha Puja. 2022, Abhayagiri. Apologize for the coughing. During the break, I was getting to know contents of the stomach, one of the Asubha contemplations, and the acid kind of messed my throat up. So, but I love it, the real practice. This is the real practice. Pain. Yes. More pain. But, I always get really inspired by the Buddha. Just the fact that he did the ascetic practices, even though he said that was the wrong practice, it's quite amazing that he actually went to that extent to seek awakening. And sometimes I come back to the name of Abhayagiri, fearless mountain, where actually we can overcome fear. We have to make it conscious, though, to overcome fear. And if we go about our lives with an unhealthy amount of fear, that can be to our detriment. It's similar to this dynamic that happens when we have very refined food preferences and we worry about getting the right types of food. We can actually, the anxiety and worry that we're not going to get the right type of food for us can actually be bad for our health. So the amount of time we spend worrying about it can actually be detrimental to our health, perhaps even worse than not getting the food that we need for our optimal health and well-being. So fear is similar. Fear is similar. So fearlessness, fearless mountain, Abhaya. Abhaya is translated as fearless, but it also means, it's like Abhaya dana, the giving of fearlessness, but it also has a connotation of forgiveness, because when you give forgiveness, when you offer forgiveness to somebody, you offer them fearlessness, because they no longer have to be afraid that that you haven't forgiven them, that you're holding a grudge against them, or so on. So you actually, when you give forgiveness, or you ask for forgiveness, and you give forgiveness, then you're actually bestowing fearlessness on somebody by being forgiving of them. Also, it's said in the suttas, there's one type of wise person who asks for forgiveness, and another type of wise person who gives forgiveness. Those are aspects of wisdom. And if we're unwilling to both ask forgiveness, and if we're unwilling to give forgiveness, especially that's the important one perhaps, if we're unwilling to give forgiveness, then that shows a lack of wisdom, according to the suttas. So that's good to see, that say like grudges or long-term ill will can only be held due to a lack of wisdom. So that sense of giving fearlessness, giving forgiveness. There's also the Buddha talking about mindfulness of the body, that it makes it so much, the practice of mindfulness of the body, if we do it often, it's incredibly pleasant. Even if we have a painful sensation somewhere in the body and we practice mindfulness of the body, then that can actually be very, very helpful. That sense of calming can ease any pain in the body. If through the course of the practice we're experiencing some sort of strong emotion, or this is normal, these kind of things come up, then coming back to where is it in the body is incredibly helpful. This is how we also develop patient endurance. It's if we don't make a problem out of something, then we're cultivating patient endurance. Kanti paramang tapotitika. So that's the patient endurance. Kanti is the highest Dhamma, burning up the defilements. Nibbanang paramang wadanti buddha. That's Nibbana is the supreme. Nibbana is the highest happiness. Nibbana is the highest. Say the Buddhas. Teach the Buddhas. Yeah, so there's all these aspects of the Ovada Patimokkha. It's a very interesting teaching because in the Ovada Patimokkha, it's in the Veluvana, the bamboo grove, squirrel's sanctuary, the first monastery that was established by the Buddha. It was offered by King Bimbisara. And so that was actually after the first Vasa. So it was like 1 year into the Buddha's dispensation when that monastery got offered. So this particular teaching, it was where it said that 1,250 arhants came together spontaneously without prior arrangement. These 1,250 arhants, they had different qualities to them. One of the qualities was they were all ehi bhikkhu, ordained bhikkhus, so that they all were ordained based on the Buddha simply saying, "Come bhikkhu," and then he ordained them that way. And then he gives a teaching, so even though they're arhants already, he's laying out the fundamentals of the holy life. And it's these very simple things. It's like knowing the right measure in food, having a secluded place to sit and lie down, commitment to the higher mind, cultivation of patient endurance. One who injures others can't be called a samana, can't be called a monk. One who insults or uses wrong speech in that way can't be called one gone forth. So these are just very, very basic, these very basic teachings pertaining to the higher mind or the holy life, the way you live the holy life. So he wasn't saying you got to do something really special, or you got to be somebody special, or you have to do some sort of really complicated special practice. He didn't say anything like that. He just said knowing the right measure in food, being gentle in speech, practicing patient endurance, patiently enduring the vicissitudes of life, sitting and lying down in a secluded dwelling place. This, all the Buddhas teach this. This is what they teach. Nibbana is the highest. So there doesn't have to be any complicated issues or years of therapy to work through our complicated issues. It's just commitment to solitude, patient endurance. That's the duty. He's laying out the duties of those gone forth, or the duties of those who want to practice. So we go about doing our duties. Like Master Shu Yun he says, just go about doing your duties as an anonymous religious person. We don't have to be anybody special, don't have to do anything special. Just going about our duties. then at the same time, that takes a sense of fearlessness, that takes a sense of courage, because it's hard to look at ourselves. There's all these emotions and the moods we call the aramanas. There's the thoughts, good thoughts, bad thoughts. We want to hold on to the good thoughts. We want to get rid of the bad thoughts. We have to work through our emotions, get rid of those emotions. So the Buddha's saying, just come back to the body, and just kaya gatasati, that's just the mindfulness of the body. This very basic practice. Where's Nibbana found? It's found in this fathom-long body. And there's another interesting teaching where the Buddha says, how does the Arahant see the body? The Arahant sees this body as feeble. That's how the Arahant sees this body. And it really is, it really is quite feeble if you really look at it. Like, even if you work out or you're strong, like this body is just like, it's very soft and kind of injurable and flaccid. Even if we have like really strong muscles, those muscles themselves are quite soft actually. And even our bones are fairly easy to break. So that, yes, this body, of course an Arahant would see it that way. The body is quite feeble. And then even no matter how much Qigong and yoga we do, then it ages. It ages, it gets old. So, reflecting today, I remember it was earlier last year, my parents offering the meal, and then I believe I was with Tanrakito, and my mom was reflecting a little bit. She said, yeah, life is so kind of interesting, because we were talking about aging. We were having a bit of a Dhamma discussion about aging. She said, yeah, when you're young, you're always looking forward. Like, what am I going to do with my life? What am I going to achieve? What am I going to make of things? But then as you age and as you go on, that kind of, you get about my age, you get about 40, 41, and then that starts to shift. And then you get past that, and then you're looking back. So at first you're looking forward, and then it's kind of like, okay, I'm 40 now, 41 now, like, okay, well, what do I have to show for it? What have I achieved, rather than what am I going to achieve? It's like the mind starts to look back, like, what do I have to show for this? So we spend the first half of our life looking forward, and the second half of our life looking back, and when are we ever just here? So that's the Dhamma practice, is just arriving and just doing our duty. We don't have to worry so much about what we're going to achieve in the future or what we achieved in the past. So the past is just the past. The future is just an idea. So how is that proliferation about the past and future keeping us from being at ease in the present? And Arahant is the best way to live. Arahant is the best way to live. So we might think like, well, I even heard somebody tell me before, I don't want to be an Arahant because I'll be lonely in Nibbana. There's not that many people there. So I don't want to be an Arahant. And my response to that was like, well, there's no loneliness. Would you rather go to hell because you won't be lonely? Rather be a ghost because I won't be lonely there? No, there's no loneliness in Nibbana. Or like there might be that idea, well, I want wait, because there's all these things I want to do, and if I become an arhat, I won't want to do them anymore. So I want to do all these things. I want to, make money or go to Vegas or win the lottery or whatever. I want to, use your imagination. But I wouldn't worry about that. So getting our minds around that arhat is the best way to live. So you had this Dhammamala achieving arhat at the age of 7 when he was having his head shaved to become a novice, seeing the hair fall down and contemplating the impermanence of hair and achieving arhatship. And Venerable Sivali, I believe, as well, arhat at the age of 7. So then they lived their lives in the best way possible, lived their lives as arhats. And Venerable Dhammamala, he was kind of like, well, okay, might as well serve the Sangha. So he was the lodgings officer. Even though he was an arhat, he was the lodgings officer at Savati, Jeta's Grove, and Attapindika's Park. And then he had a psychic power. They didn't have flashlights back then, but he had a psychic power where he could light up his finger like E.T. He could light it up, and then he had this phenomenon where monks were showing up and deliberately asking for the farthest away lodgings at night so that they could see this phenomenon of his finger lighting up the path when he took them to their lodgings. So, but he lived without suffering. So he's Dhammamala arhat at the age of 7, lived in the best way possible. He lived without suffering, without dukkha. So getting our mind around that. One of the factors for Nibbana, it's said, is that if one doesn't see Nibbana as the highest happiness, one can't get there, one can't attain it, because the mind doesn't leap out and gain confidence in it, gain enthusiasm in it. And that's part of the development of right view as well. So Nibbanang Paramang Vadanti Buddha, that's Nibbana is the highest. That's what the Buddhas teach. So all of us will encounter all sorts of obstacles. I mean, this evening I was kind of thinking, like, you got to be kidding me. Like, I haven't felt sick or nausea like this for a really long time. Why does it have to be tonight? Why does it have to be inconvenient? The most inconvenient timing. It's because it's like, couldn't the body just decide to do it some other night, the day after Wanpra? It could have done it on the day after Wanpra, and it would have been so much more convenient. But it doesn't follow that schedule, so it just has its own schedule. So there's always going to be these obstacles, and so thinking, okay, well, how can I actually make this work? And when there is these types of hardships, sometimes it can actually have a brightening effect on the mind, and it can actually have a good result. So that's turning obstacles into the path, and turning obstacles into the path. It kind of, I wasn't even sure if I should tell this story, but because my parents probably don't even know about it. But when I was running cross country, and I wasn't a very good runner, but I was in college, and I joined the cross country team, and mainly just to get in shape. And but I was also, mainly interested in partying, actually, and maybe the getting in shape was a secondary consideration. But so like there was all these star runners, and they were careful not to drink too much at the parties. But for me, I didn't care, because I wasn't a great runner. I was just there as part of the team. So I was at this track party and drank way too much. And then the next day was this big track meet, and where I was going to run in a race. And in the morning time, just before getting on the bus to go to this track meet in Santa Barbara, I was just really, really sick from the night before, and hadn't slept at all, almost at all, and I was being sick in the bushes next to the bus that was about to take us to the track meet. And my coach came and was like, I sort of like came out of the bushes and coach was right there. And he's like, "Are you ready to go?" And I was kind of like, like white. I was like, "Yes, I'm ready to go." And then I actually ran my best time out of the whole season on that race, the 1500, and it was so sometimes when you get into that, there's obstacles, and you get into that mode of like, well, you just don't care anymore. Then that's actually, and sometimes that's actually the best, and rather than, we don't really have time to overthink it. We're just in the moment, and I felt terrible. I just felt terrible going into that race, but I just didn't care. And you read these stories about the Buddha when he was doing his practice, and of course, the pain he went through was based on much more wholesome things than that. But he talks about dealing with racking, piercing feelings, and dealing with loneliness and cold. He talks about, even in the Majjhima Nikaya, he talks about, in the Discourse on the Lion's Roar, he talks about, it seems like he might be talking about his past lives. I think according to the commentary he says that, but in the sutta it's not actually clear whether he's talking about that life or his past lives, but he talks about how all of his extreme practices of eating and his extreme practices of coarseness, not bathing for extremely long periods of time, and trying to develop an equanimous mind through all of that. And he's talking about one time going into the most awe-inspiring groves he could possibly go into and practicing complete solitude, trying to never see people and look directly at fear and loneliness and these mental factors and gaining insight into them, and doing these extreme practices of going about naked and sitting in the scorching sun during the middle of the summer, and then in the middle of the winter going in the coldest place possible into the grove, and in the middle of winter. And then he says, and then verses never heard before spontaneously occurred to my mind. And he said, it's one of these verses I learned when I was in Taodam that I found very inspiring. But it's scorched by sun and soaked by rain, alone in awe-inspiring groves, naked with no fire to sit beside, the sage yet pursues his quest. So that he had this sense of like, no matter what was happening, he was never going to give up. So that was the I would take that as the main factor, like never giving up, continuing to move forward and never giving up. And you see other great teachers like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, never give up. Whatever you do, never give up. So that's one part of patient endurance as well. And we can use those never give up phrases and find little Dhammapada quotes and sutta quotes to keep ourselves going, to recite to ourselves and inspire ourselves. And that really is kind of how we do it. We don't just sit and wait for something to happen, or we don't just sit and wait for some sort of inspiration to shine on us from above, but we actually do have to do something to prod ourselves and find a skillful means to help ourselves move forward. So that's probably enough for this evening, and we'll end the talk there.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
And we'll do this, all of this call and repeat page before the circumambulation. And so after this, we'll start by bowing 3 times to the shrine, and then we'll do Namo Tassa, and we'll do then everybody will repeat after me these phrases about Magha Puja. Then we would help each other light our candles, and we'll go out for the circumambulation. Also, before I forget, at the end of the circumambulation, you'll be able to place the incense in the incenser at the bell tower, but then for the flowers, if they could all be brought back in here. Namayan Buddhassa Bhagavato Pubaba Ganamakarang Karomase Namo Tassa Bhagavato Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Today, being the full moon of February, it is Magha Puja. The day when the Tathagata, the completely enlightened Buddha, taught the Ovada Patimokkha to the assembled Savaka Sangha at noon on that full moon day in February. These 1,250 bhikkhus, whose hearts were completely pure, had gathered together without prior arrangement at the Lord Buddha's residence at Velu Vanarama. The Lord Buddha made this the occasion to teach the 4 verses of the Ovada Patimokkha, which elucidates the practice of purity to that unique assembly of wise beings. Now we have all come together to recollect and reflect on the occasion of Magha Puja and on our revered teacher, the Buddha, who attained complete liberation long ago. We send forth our respect and gratitude to him and those 1,250 arahants by offering these candles, incense and flowers to the sacred shrine of the Lord Buddha. Although he passed into Nibbana long ago, the Buddha's guiding influence is still with us today. May our offerings be received and accepted for our long-lasting welfare and for the happiness of all future generations. Sadhu, sadhu.